Well, you think about all the prophecies about Jesus, all the prophetic utterances about the coming of the Messiah through the Old Testament, and then the fulfillment. Now, we always say, if someone gives you a word or someone says, this is a prophetic utterance or whatever, you've got to weigh that, you've got to weigh it, you've got to see if it comes to pass. How many years did people wait for the Messiah, the promised one of God, to actually enter the world? And so I sit there and I go, at Jesus' birth, no wonder the angels sang.
Welcome to the Prophecy Project, an accessible prophecy podcast. In each episode, we explore some aspect of prophecy, from theology and practical aspects of hearing God, through to leading healthy prophetic cultures and exploring how prophecy can enhance local mission. Accessible Prophecy is a global ministry that helps individuals grow in the prophetic and helps local churches grow healthy and mature prophetic cultures. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Hill and Christine Wanstall.
Andrew, it's so good to see you, and welcome back everyone to the Prophecy Project. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm really good. How are you?
I'm good. Now, we started a couple of podcasts ago saying we cannot keep talking about the weather, but seriously, in Melbourne, it's a month before Christmas and it's 10 days before summer hits. What is going on?
Well, I actually think we have stepped back in time, and I'm expecting birthday presents in a couple of weeks because it feels like it's June. It really does.
It does. Totally.
I must admit, I was watching Kerry Newhoff's Instagram the other day, and he put up pictures of the first snowfall in Canada, and I'm just sitting there going, normally he's getting snow and I'm out riding my bike or going on the boat. At the moment, I feel like it's the same. Are we in the same place? Because it's like snowing here in Melbourne in the ranges, and it's snowing over there. It's freezing, and we have had so much rain. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm over rain.
I know. It was raining. It was hailing yesterday, and it was 9 degrees, and we're 10 days out from summer. Tell me how that works. I just couldn't believe.
I don't understand it. Apart from maybe God saying something about, there is the storm has to come to an end and the sun will shine. Maybe that's the prophetic utterance that we can take away from that, because I'm believing it.
Maybe.
I just got to believe it because I want some sunshine for my holidays.
So in the Southern Hemisphere, this is one of the key differences that I'm aware of, that for us, December marks the end of the year. I know it's the end of the calendar year, but it actually marks the end of school years, university years. All of the university students are now out. Most of them have finished exams. School kids will start to finish school in the next 3 weeks or so. And it really, Christmas marks the beginning of the summer holidays for us, doesn't it?
It sure does, and we cannot wait.
Caravans
go down the beach. Oh, the summer comes, nice warm weather. You start to thaw out a little bit. Well, we hope we're going to thaw out, but at the moment it doesn't look like we are. Anyway.
Oh, no, it's a bit crazy. So summer marks like our long summer and rest and recreation for us. In the Northern Hemisphere, it's the Christmas in the snow and the cool, and it marks, it's almost like they're mid-year in terms of the routines. But for us, it's the end of the year and it's a good rest. So I was thinking today in our podcast, we could chat a little bit, because this is our last one for season 1. Can you believe it? Ooh. We've lasted 13 episodes. So in our last one...
Well done.
Yes. Woo! Surely there is some background noise about cheering that we could put on there, but I'm not going to try and find it now. So I thought we could do 2 things. We could have a bit of a recap, what struck us about this season, what are the things that we noticed around the things we chatted about, but also, which I want to talk about first, as we approach Christmas, how can we actually use prophetic gifts, the prophetic people in our church, or dig in and into our own prophetic gifts to approach Christmas with a slightly different way. Like, what are some of the ways that we could dig in and use the prophetic gift? Because my observation, and it's just mine, that sometimes I feel like we approach Christmas, that we just pull out the Christmas story. Yeah, to be honest, sometimes it's just a bit blah. There must be, if God is such an amazing creative God, which we know that He is, how can we tap into God's voice about what He wants us to notice this Christmas? So that's my question.
Well, that's a great question, and I would almost answer it with a question, which my question would be: isn't this the greatest prophetic event that has ever taken place on the planet?
Unpack that a bit more for me.
Well, you think about all the prophecies about Jesus, all the prophetic utterances about the coming of the Messiah through the Old Testament, and then the fulfillment. Now, we always say, if someone gives you a word or someone says, this is a prophetic utterance or whatever, you've got to weigh that. You've got to weigh it. You've got to see if it comes to pass. How many years did people wait for the Messiah, the promised one of God, to actually enter the world? And so I sit there and I go, at Jesus' birth, no wonder the angels sang. No wonder the angels appeared. It's like the fulfillment of all of the prophecies that came about in Jesus. This is the most celebrated prophetic event that I think. Now, maybe people will say other things, trumpet, but jeepers, I don't know how you trump Jesus coming to earth.
I love that reframe around the angels singing. Why wouldn't the angels sing? And there is some glorious choral music that tries to put expression to what it may have been like, where they sang glory to God in the highest and proclaiming Jesus' birth. But you're absolutely right. Like, the birth fulfills prophecy. It's the commencement of God's voice coming back into the world, His presence with us. I like that. I like how you've identified putting it in the context of the big picture story of it.
And I even go back, I think a number of years ago, I tried to do some work around this whole idea of when God created the universe, he had in mind this moment in time, because we know from scientific proof that you can't just plonk a star in place and hope it doesn't upset the equilibrium of all the orbits of the planets. And so how much work did God do even at the point of creation? Now, this blows my mind, right? This absolutely blows my mind, because a star appeared which was so bright in the sky, and so it had to have been orbiting at a particular rate to intersect right at the time over Bethlehem when Jesus was born. And so I sit there and I go, God Himself had put a massive amount of planning into this to have those two things intersect right at that point. See, when you start to work that through, it's like all of the prophetic utterances come to fruition right at this point. But even God's planning Himself for this event, it blows me away. It absolutely blows me away. Because He can't just, because we know if you just put something in orbit, it can upset everything. It upsets tides, it upsets, planets, alignments, orbits, all those sorts of things. And so He would have had to have had this star in the solar system rotating at a particular point to intersect right at this moment. I think that is amazing. Now, I'm no scientist, so I don't know all the ins and outs, but my faith level rises every time I think about that. And so, it's a pretty special time of year.
That's amazing. It reminds me of, I once heard someone talk about that exact thing, you know, putting this within the context of the universe and the stars and the, you know, and they uttered this phrase something like, now, next time I talk about this, I'll say, I once said, and then the next time,
Of
as
course.
I always say,
Of
of
course.
course. So they sort of said, if you think your view of God is big, it's not big enough, because God is much bigger than we could ever imagine.
Yes.
And that, like the sense of his power and his glory, and his capacity is so much bigger, and we have just this small understanding about who God is and what he's like and how he intersects with us. I love that image of the star and the light, because one of the things as I've been praying and thinking about Christmas is John 1, verse 5. And John 1, you know, as we know, John 1, in the first few verses, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind.
Yeah.
And then verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And it just struck me that maybe I could do a listening exercise, because we always talk about one of the ways to build our prophetic muscles is to do a listening exercise. I wondered what it would be like to do a listening exercise around that verse. So the light has come into the darkness. And you could do it from a big picture point of view in our church or in the world. Where is the light? Where's God wanting to bring light this Christmas?
Well, that's a great question. That's a really great
Or
question.
you could do it in your own life, like, Lord, where are there places in my life where there's darkness that you're wanting to shine a light into? Where are you wanting to, because it's not just light, but it's that word that comes alongside it as life. So the light and the life in God is life, and he brings the light into the darkness. So for us, as we approach this Christmas, where is it that Jesus, or that God is wanting to shine a light in for us and bring life into that space?
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, that's just one way that we can use the Christmas story as a listening exercise to really engage in a really different way this Christmas.
Yeah. And it becomes quite life-changing. I mean, you're talking about doing some life application study around even listening to God and letting him prophetically speak to you this Christmas. You said, I can't remember whether you used the word blah, but I think you did, but you might edit it out.
Blah.
But you know.
I did. Blah. It's blah.
But because Christmas is like, oh, it's just Christmas. Oh, yeah, we're back into Christmas. And I mean, we're being bombarded by ads and, you know, blah, all the stuff, all the usual stuff about Christmas and sales and, you know, blah, all that.
Now, hang on. Tell me what the deal is with people putting their Christmas trees up on the 1st of November. Like, that is a long lead time to Christmas.
Yeah, it is.
And I just want to ask, normally you have a star on your bookshelf and I've noticed it's not there. Does that mean that your Christmas tree is up?
No, I just got sick of having all this clutter on my bookshelf, and so I actually took it all down. But somebody's put something up the top there now that I'm noticing, actually.
Is it a light?
Yeah, there's something up there.
The light shines in the darkness, Andrew.
That's what it is. That's what it
is.
is. But no, the star is actually down on the floor. But it will go up.
Okay.
It should go out in the Christmas decorations because it was just something that got left over last year. But yeah, I think actually doing some reflection and some life application and letting God speak to us about things like that, you know, where does the light need to shine in our lives this Christmas? Where does God's life need to come out in our lives this Christmas? They are really great questions, because there are plenty of people, I think there are plenty of people who are isolated, who are lonely. I think it's the shadow pandemic now. I've said that before. And so, you know, there are plenty of people who will be lonely and isolated this Christmas, and that's not a nice place to be for anyone. So maybe it's the challenge for the church to engage with people and to really say, okay, God, where do you want my light, your light through me, to shine this Christmas? I think that would be a
I like
really
that.
good challenge.
Your light through me.
Yeah.
Now, if we think about, sometimes we talk about up in and out. So up our relationship with God, in our relationship with other believers, mostly if you're connected with a church, it would be that, and then out in mission. I'm wondering how this sort of question or creative exercise might work in each of those three areas.
That would be
Any brainstorm? This was a question without notice. So any brainstorming from wisdom from Andrew?
Yeah, wisdom. I'm pretty short on wisdom at the moment. But I do think, look, and we joked about the weather before and how cold it is, but there are plenty of people, Victoria and New South Wales, the two sort of southern eastern states on the side of Australia, for those of you who are not in our own country, but they're flood affected at the moment, and that's going to move across into South Australia as well as the river system takes all the water. I think there are plenty of people who need help this Christmas, and so even looking at that outward direction, whether it's people who are lonely or isolated, or people who have actually just been inundated by floods or natural disasters. I think of, those friends of ours in Florida who, just went through that massive hurricane. And so I just sit there and I go, for those people who are tuning in the US, and in other countries around the world, there are so many areas where we can reach out and really let the light of Christ that is in us shine through us this Christmas into people's lives. And it doesn't have to be hard. I think we can take some easy steps. That's the out. You can do the in.
Thanks.
No worries. I like throwing it back. It's like table tennis.
Well,
Sometimes,
that's right. And the out can be a bit messy, can't it? And it depends how much we want to push into that out. For us, one of the biggest challenges in recent years we've attempted to push into is who can we invite to be around our table on Christmas Day? Yeah. Because, there are lots of people who are on their own who, sit in their lounge room on their own on Christmas Day. And so for us, we've really attempted to push out into how can we be Jesus to them and be family for them. And it's amazing that when you start to even say, God, I'm available, just the way that people come into your life, our Christmas table looks very different year after year as to who's sitting around it. And so just really encourage you, maybe for you it's people who are listening, maybe it's the weeks leading up. Are there people that you can connect with and invite around your table? With the in, I think it's really sitting there saying, all right, Lord, where is there light and life that you want to bring to our church? And that might be in celebrating ministries or people. It might be in even just telling people and explaining and exploring together, what does it look like for God to bring life into our church? What does it look like for God to bring light into our church? And then I think that individual space, us with God and our worship as we are in quiet times with God, just allowing God in that up space to reveal himself in a much deeper way. God is constantly wanting to reveal himself in deeper ways to us every day.
Yeah.
And so that sense of quietening our hearts in the busyness of Christmas, I think, is the biggest challenge for us. Yeah. And I probably would say, as I'm an external processor, so as I talk, new thoughts come. I probably would say in the church space, maybe it's actually in different points in the service, in our busyness of activity, celebrating the end of the year, celebrating Christmas, actually trying to find spaces where we can have a bit of stillness, where we can quieten our hearts and where we can engage with God in that deeper way. One of the previous podcasts, I know Kath talked about just the power of stillness and quietening.
Yes.
Brandon talked about it
too, yeah.
in episode 11, just quietening our minds and our hearts and allowing God to start speaking into that space. So Christmas is so busy.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to find the spaces of quiet and not crashing into Christmas would be, well, that's probably my little rant for the day.
But that's a great little takeaway. Don't crash into Christmas. Like,
Yeah.
That whole idea of, I was even thinking about, that inside of things, and I just wrote down, 3 words that came to mind. You think about Christmas, Emmanuel, God is with us. That means he's present, right? He's present with us. But that doesn't just mean, well, he's here. No. Yeah, he is, but he's in close proximity to us, like he was with the disciples at that time. So that means he wants to have relationship with us. He wants to engage with us. He wants to be working with us and prompting us. And because the proximity, he's close enough for us to talk to, not to yell and scream at because he's, way down the back paddock or something, but he's actually in close proximity to us. And because of that, and this is, I think, the personal reflection space and the praise that comes from that, is that he brings that positive transformation to our lives. Jesus being present with us in close proximity means that we are positively transformed for the betterment of society, the betterment of the world, the betterment of his kingdom. And I think then that leads us to be able to share that positive transformation with other people. The church might have a bad rap at Christmas. People might go, no, I'm not doing that. But it doesn't mean to say people don't want to engage with Jesus. I think they do. And maybe that's the story that we can share, not only about Jesus, but about what he's done in our lives and the positive transformation that comes when he does engage with us.
So how do we not crash into Christmas?
I do wonder whether it is maybe some of what you talked about before, is that space, creating that space to listen, creating that space to even give him praise for what he's done. I know people hate Christmas carols at the best of times.
I love them. I just want to put them out.
I do too.
I love them.
I do too. And one of my daughters, she is a Christmas carol, and I won't say a Christmas carolaholic, but she just loves them that much. Like, she's already playing them. We had family dinner a few weeks ago and she put some Christmas carols and we're like, what, already? And she goes, I love Christmas carols. But the reality is they are so meaningful, and maybe it is stopping again, and the familiarity breeds contempt. We go, oh, we know this, blah, blah, and it becomes blah. But maybe going back and joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. Well, let's make that personal. Let the people that I know receive the King, and how can I help them receive him this year? There's a big challenge. There's a big challenge.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's these different lines, oh, come, let us adore him. What do we adore? Are we adoring him or other things this season? I sit there and I go, I get choked up when I say these things. It's amazing when you start to hear what God can do in us and through us, because of what he has done. I think is great. Yeah.
So that's a great segue into remembering what he has done in our podcast this season. And because I think we're so full of stuff, busyness. I'm quite big on trying to pause and do a bit of reflection. And so maybe that's something as we get to the end of the year that people can do as well, just reflect what has God done in our lives, what is God doing, and that transforming effect for him. But I just thought we could just do a really quick recap around what were the highlights of this season of our podcast, and what were the things that just stood out to us. And when I was thinking about this, the thing that stood out for me is how much fun I've had doing it. So I've loved having the conversations between the two of us and having our guests in and interviewing them. But just, talking through what does it mean for God to speak to us. There's life-giving, it's just this sense of life-giving around tapping in and trying to help people engage with God's voice.
Yeah.
So that would be my first takeaway.
That's
how
good.
much fun it's been and just the life-giving element of it.
And I would totally agree with that. And I think the whole idea of making prophecy accessible, wow, hey, there you go, has been really good.
We should start a ministry about that. We have.
I reckon it should. But even that whole idea of, I don't know, I think as I continue to reflect, I keep thinking about, not only the fun, but I do think about some of the rants that we've had, which have been good. And I think they stir passion and evoke emotion about the prophetic, which I think says something in itself. And I do wonder, even as we have talked and hopefully as people have engaged with the podcast, I'm not just saying listened to the podcast, but engaged with it and then started to implement some things, I hope that people have grown as a result. I know as I've listened to different ones, like I think of Kath, talking about that holy disruption from her book and that whole idea of, okay, it is God's timing, and it's not just about putting him in our box and, all those sorts of things and bits and pieces. And then some of the other things that she was saying, I sit there and I go, oh my goodness, I grew as I listened to her. When we, again, reminding us about Brandon, and that whole idea of, taking those moments in the shower, here's an admission, our water bill's gone up. Because I slowed down. I actually decided to take some time in the shower each day and just go, okay, God, what are you doing? How can I be part of what you're doing today? Just asking that simple question in whatever way, shape or form that might be. And so again, listening to these different people engaging with you, that question that you asked before, where can we shine light into into people's lives this Christmas? I actually stopped and I wrote that down. So it's like those things are really powerful. And so I hope for other people, not just ourselves, but I hope for others that this has helped them grow this year.
I remember back to a couple of our early podcasts, and I remember how nervous I was when we started, and so I'm feeling much more comfortable about things now, which is great. But we started around identity, and we started around that sense of connecting, what's our place before God? How does he see us? Yeah. And the challenge, really where the prophetic can go wrong when how successful, putting that in inverted commas, we are in our prophetic words, that if we tie that to our identity, things can go really wrong really quickly. Yeah. And so the importance of actually seeing ourselves as loved children of God, that he speaks to us because he loves us. And then the other thing I think has been a bit of a theme for me this season has been recognising the packaging that can go around prophetic ministry in churches. So we can see particular forms of prophetic ministry as being the way that we should do prophetic ministry, but actually God speaks to us in a whole lot of different ways, in a whole lot of broad ways. And if we can just broaden out some of the ways that our church engages, we can help everyone hear God, not just those who stand up the front and deliver words. Yeah. So it's some of that I think, wow, it's really important that we broaden out our understanding of prophetic, what the prophetic does, and the function and role that it has. And I remember back to Brandon Kelly's interview with us where he talked about the fivefold and how it sits within community, and it's one of the gifts to grow up the church. And so just some of those things I think has been an incredibly rich season for us. Yeah, it's so good, isn't it? And I even wonder, and probably some of our listeners know that I'm involved with microchurches, and particularly the microchurch network across Victoria and now a little bit across Australia. But one of the things that we keep talking about is establishing a room or a table in every town or every street, wherever it can be. And I even think that even some of those statements, like I'm even thinking now that some of those statements are actually quite prophetic for where the church is heading in the future.
And so I must admit that even as we've been engaging through this podcast, and I've been talking with other people, I think God's speaking through other people. That phrase, a room or a table, actually came from, a friend in South Australia, in Mount Gambier. And so he's starting to talk this way. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. What if God did that? What if God did that? And actually, and I can say this, he's starting to do that in so many different places. And
that's fantastic.
It's amazing. So, just being open to even listening to what other people who are godly people around you are saying can be some of those things that we go, oh, I need to grab that phrase. I need to grab that phrase. And I think for me, listening to different people, you, Chris, on the podcast as well, have been, that whole idea of, I've just got to tune into what God's saying a little bit more, because I think there's some things that he's trying to do at this moment in time for the church and for his people, which will be amazing if we step into them.
That's such a good place for us to finish up. Just that sense of hope and expectancy that God is speaking. He is faithful for our next step. He wants us to thrive. He wants us to step into places, and his voice is not silent to show us where we need to go and what we need to do.
Yeah.
Andrew, it's been an absolute joy to do this season with you, and I cannot wait to see what our next season is about. I reckon there is a whole lot of stuff around social justice, the voice of God in that space, maybe a bit more around the barriers that we individually and from a church experiences in terms of tuning into God. There's endless conversations that we can have in this space.
Absolutely. But it's been great, Chris. I so appreciated your honesty and your openness as you've, engaged and thoughtfully brought things to the table for us to talk about and for us to engage with. I think it's been fantastic. So thank you so much for all the effort that you've put in this year. It's been amazing as you've guided us through this whole season.
Thanks, Andrew. And we can't finish our podcast without thanking Dave, our back-end guy, who's done all of the production stuff.
Yeah.
Dave, you are amazing, and you work faithfully to bring God's kingdom to everyone around. So, Andrew, Merry Christmas. May the light and life of God come into your house and your family today. And we're just praying that for all of the listeners who are hearing this as well. So we look forward to next season, and we will see you then.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you for listening to the Prophecy Project. We hope you've been encouraged as you've listened today. We would love to connect with you. You can do that by following Accessible Prophecy on Instagram and Facebook. If you have a question or topic you would like us to cover, please check the podcast information description for ways that you can connect with us and for links to resources, workshops, and coaching. We hope you'll join us for the next Prophecy Project podcast.